Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Easy Learn, and today's topic is algebra, within which we're going to be doing quadratic equations, and it's practice time today. To begin with, we've already discussed that quadratic equations can be solved using three ways, that is, the zero factored property, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. You can find the links in the description below. Go understand the concepts in my previous videos, and then you can come back for solving today's question. So today's question says, shown is a right angled triangle with sides measured in centimeters. Show that x squared minus 5x minus 14 is equal to 0. The B part says find x, and the C part says find the area of the triangle. Now, as you can see, the triangle, it's a weird little vague triangle that has a few values, not exactly values in numbers, but you have different variables and numbers attached all together. It says x plus 5, x minus 2, 2x minus 1. Now, you have to somehow do something to these values so that you get x squared minus 5x minus 14. Now, as you see, there's an x squared attached to it, so you have to use a little common sense and your trigonometric background in this, where you must know that if you have a right angle triangle and if you are struggling to find the length of that right angle triangle, you are supposed to use the Pythagoras theorem. Now, what does the Pythagoras theorem say? It looks something like this: a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's what you gotta apply. Whenever you see a right angle triangle, you see these weird little values, and then you have to prove that something has to result in an x squared. So you have to make sure that you go back on something that gives you a square, and that is the Pythagoras theorem. That is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, A and B are the vertical and horizontal sides always, and the diagonal side is my C. I'm just going to rename this as ABC, and then now I'm going to put it in. So now I'm going to do, let's say A squared, so I'm going to do x plus 5, and then a whole squared, plus B squared, that is my x minus 2 squared, is equal to C squared, and my C is 2x minus 1 whole squared. Now, how do I solve squares? Now, here's another way to do it. There are two ways to do it actually. I can just take like x plus 5 and I can open up another x plus 5 because x plus 5 whole squared means that x plus 5 multiplied with another x plus 5. But this is just too much of steps, because if we do that, we have to do first x with x, then an x with 5, then again 5 with x, 5 with 5. Then we'll have two 5x's, and then we'll have to add them up, just to add the like terms and all. So it's just going to result in too many steps. That's why we just move on to a arrangement that says a plus b whole squared, which means a plus b, I can say that x plus 5 is the same as my a plus b whole squared, is equal to, when you open up that, you can just simply do a squared plus 2 times the a times the b plus b squared. So that just makes it a lot easier to solve squares like these. So a squared, now let's say x is my a and 5 is my b. So a squared means x squared, x times x is just x squared. I'm going to write x squared plus 2ab. Now 2 times the a. So 2 times the x, that means 2x, and then 2x times the 5. So obviously 5 is a number, so it has to be multiplied with the 2. So 2 times 5 gives me a 10, and then 10 times x is a 10x. So x squared plus 10x plus b squared. Now 5 is my b. 5 times 5 is 25. Therefore, in just one single step, I got my answer: x squared plus 10x plus 25. Now, if you do the same thing, if you try and work out the square using this specific method, you're going to get the same answer in the end. But this is just a more direct way of approaching a question like this. Now, moving on. The next part again, we have x and a minus 2, and we're supposed to square it up. Let me put a plus sign here because there's a plus sign outside. Now, again, let's say this is x is my a, and let's say negative 2 is my b. Now, again, a squared means this a, that is x, x times x, again, x squared, then 2 times the a times the b. Now 2 times the negative 2, that is a negative 4, and then negative 4 times x is just negative 4x. So 2 times 2, 4, 4 times x, 4x, and then there's a negative sign, so I'm going to write negative 4x here. Then I have plus b squared. So now negative 2 squared. Now a negative 2 times a negative 2, negative and negative gives me a positive. So I'm going to write 2 times 2, 4. So it's a positive 4. So x squared negative 4x plus 4 is my final answer for x minus 2 whole squared is equal to, now again I have a 2x minus 1. Let's take this one as my a and that one as my b. So I have a squared again. So 2, now this is a little tricky because there's a 2x. This time it's not just x that we just simply write x squared, or perhaps for this one we can't just write 2x squared. We can't do that because we have a 2x and there's a square outside. This square has to be applied to the 2 as well as the x. That means 2 squared and then x squared. So 2 squared is 4, and then x squared just like that. So 4x squared, and now I have 2 times the a, so 2 times the 2x, that is 4x, and then times the b, that is negative 1. So 2 times 2, 4, 4 times negative 1, negative 4, and then I just have a negative 4x. Now I have a plus b squared. Again, negative 1 times negative 1 is supposed to be a positive 1 squared. So, I mean, negative 1 squared means positive 1. So that is pretty much it. Now, before we move on, we need to see that there are like terms here. We have an x squared with an x squared. So I got to add or subtract these two depending on whatever sign is there in between. So x squared plus x squared means there's an invisible one here, 1 plus 1 is 2. So therefore, I have a 2x squared. Now the second one, 10x is a like term to negative 4x. So 10x minus 4x is 6x. Then I have a 25 with a 4. So 25 plus 4 is 29 is equal to, now the rest of the part just comes the way it is, 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. Now, once you end up in this particular arrangement, you are supposed to realize that we have squares involved here. Now, whenever you have squares involved, that means you have to end up in a quadratic equation. In order to end up in a quadratic equation, there is a specific arrangement that you need to follow, and that is ax squared plus bx plus c. There's no equals here and there, nothing. It's basically equals to 0. Right? But here, as you can see, there are two equations, one on the right, one on the left. There's no equals to 0. One equation is equal to the other equation. So for that, in order to turn it into equals to 0, you need to take everything to one side so that you can solve it, and you will end up in one single equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So now if I take everything on the other side, so let's say 4x squared, let my 4x squared be there. Now 2x squared goes to the other side. 2x squared is positive here, goes to the other side, turns into negative. So 4x squared minus 2x squared. Then I have minus 4x there, so I'm just going to drop down the way it is. And then this 6x goes to the other side, turns into negative. Because there's a positive here, turns to the other, goes to the other side, turns into negative. So negative 4x, negative 6x. Now plus 1 again just comes the way it is. And then 29 goes to the other side, turns into negative because there's a positive here, becomes negative. So I have negative 28, and everything is going to be equal to 0 now because nothing on the other side. Now I gotta solve the like terms. 4x minus 2x is just 2x squared. 4x minus 4x squared minus 2x squared, 2x squared. 4 minus 2 is just 2. Now negative 4 and negative 6 is a negative 10x. And then, oh, that was a 29, not a 28. So it was a positive 1 minus a 29. So 1 minus 29, you subtract 1 from 29 and the sign is going to stay negative. So it becomes negative 28 is equal to 0. Now what happens is, now as you can see, what they wanted us to show, they wanted us to show x squared minus 5x minus 14, but we are getting 2x squared minus 10x minus 28. Now if you really look at this, you have something in common for all of them. Do you notice that all of these are even numbers, which means that they can be simplified? Whenever in an equation all the numbers are even, you always, I mean, even or a factor of one of the numbers, then you can simply just simplify the entire equation, which means that I know that 10, 28, and 2, they all come in the table of 2. So 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 5 is 10, and 2 times 14 is 28. Therefore, my final equation becomes x squared minus 5x minus 14. Exactly the way they want us to show. So here I have x squared minus 5x minus 14. So how do I go about solving it? You have to first figure out your Pythagoras theorem, put it in, take your squares. Once you have your squares, you just open them up, square all the terms, and then you simplify the like terms, add, subtract all your like terms, and then get everything on one side of the equation, so that you can get ax squared plus bx plus c, and then you will get your final equation. So this is how you go about figuring out how to form a specific equation. Now the next part, now the first step is basically done. Now it says find x. Now here's the story. For finding the x, we use either zero factor property or completing the square or the quadratic formula. If I want to use the quadratic formula, that's kind of simplest because you just figure out your a, b, c, put it in your calculator, and you just good to go. You will find your values of x straight away. But for this one, because it's kind of a very simple problem, we mostly go for quadratic formula when you have complicated problems, or you know that things are going to result in decimal numbers or the bigger numbers or something like that. Then you go ahead with quadratic formula. Otherwise, I can also use the zero factor property to solve this. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Completing the square, we don't really use it that often unless and until there are graph related questions or there are things that we really need out of those completing the square arrangement, then we use it. Otherwise, we mostly stick to the quadratic formula or the zero factor property. I'm going to get rid of everything that I have on the screen so that we can just peacefully find our x. So moving on to finding the x. Now, as I said, I'm going to be using the zero factor property as this equation seems pretty simple. So now there are these few steps that we need to follow for zero factor property, and those steps are this. A times the c. First of all, out of this quadratic equation, I got to figure out what's my a, b, and c. What about a, b, and c? What I'm talking about is this. The general quadratic arrangement is ax squared plus bx plus c. So I'm going to figure out what's my a there. So according to this one, it's x squared, so which means that there's just an invisible 1 here. So a is 1, my b is -5, and my c, again, as it's a standalone number, so that is -14. Now, the first step says a times c, which means 14 times 1, that is just 14. The second part says find the factors of 14, right? Find the factors of ac. Now, after multiplying a and c, I got 14. So I got to figure out what are the factors for having 14. So I have 1 times 14 gives me a 14, and 2 times 7 gives me a 14. Now I have to figure out that the third step that says add or subtract the factors should give back my b. Now my b is -5. I need to add or subtract these numbers so that both of my factors, so that I end up in a -5. Now let's say if I do 1 plus 14, I get 15. If I do 1 minus 14, I get -13. If I do 14 minus 1, I get positive 13, which means no ways am I getting a -5 out of 1 and 14. So this is not the factors I'm taking. Now, if I move on to 2 and 7. So if I do 2 plus 7, I'm ending up in a 9, not getting it. If I'm doing 2 and let's say -2 plus 7, then I'm getting a positive 5. Again, not ending up in that. -2 and -7, I'm ending up in a -9, so no again. And then finally, if I do 2 minus 7, then yes, I can end up in a -5. Therefore, the factors that I'm using are +2 and -7. It's very important that you make sure that your signs are taken correctly. If you have the factors but your signs are not appropriate, then you won't really end up in a proper answer. So now, once I've figured out that I'm using 2, +2, and -7, I have to split b and replace with the factors. Now, let's say this was my equation, that is x squared minus 5x minus 14. Now, if I have to split this, the split b means that you have to split the 5x, the -5x, and then replace it with the factors that you found, that is 2 and -7. So I'm going to write x squared and then plus 2x minus 7x minus 14. So these are the two factors, +2 and -7, that I am supposed to be using. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take x squared and 2, and I'm going to take -7x and 14 as my two separate branches. Now, between x squared and 2x, what is common? X is common. So I'm going to grab my x outside. Inside, after I remove the two x's from this, if I removed one x, then I'm left with one x. And from this one, from 2x, when I removed an x, I'm just left with a 2. So I had x plus 2. Now, out of the negative 7x and negative 14, negative 7 is supposed to be the common one, because 7 times 2 gives me 14, first of all, and negative, both the signs, both the numbers have a negative sign, so I'm taking the negative 7 outside. So once the negative 7 is outside, then inside for the first one, I'm left with just the x, because negative 7 times x is negative 7x. And for the second one, I'm going to write positive 2, because negative 7 times, if I just put a negative 2 inside, the negative 7 times negative 2 would give me positive 14. But technically here I have a negative 14. That's the reason I'm going to take a positive 2 inside. So I have negative 7 times positive 2 is equal to negative 14. Now, once I have this arrangement, as you can see, there's an x plus 2 and another x plus 2. So these x plus 2's can be just written as one single factor, x plus 2, and the factor standing outside, x and a minus 7, you grab it inside as another single factor, that is x plus 2 and x minus 7 are my two factors. Now, obviously, as they say, you have to find x. So in order to find x, you need to replace this, you need to equate these factors to 0. So I'm going to do x plus 2 equals 0, which means that x is equal to 2 taken to the other side. It's a positive 2 here, goes to the other side, turns into negative 2. Therefore, I have x equals negative 2. And the other one is x minus 7, again equate to 0. There's a negative 7, goes to the other side, turns into positive, and I have x is equal to 7. So negative 2 and 7. So here I can just say that my x is either negative 2 comma 7. Now the last part that says find the area of the triangle. Now, in order to first of all figure out the area of triangle, you need to know that what is the formula of finding the area. The formula for finding the area of a triangle is half BH. B is the base, that is, let's say this one, and h is the height, that is this one. Now, half BH, for obviously finding out my base and the height, I need to put in my x values here and there so that I can figure out what's the base and what's the height. Now for that, what value should I take? You cannot be taking negative value. Obviously, a length or a base cannot be in a negative value. It couldn't be a negative 2. So I'm obviously going to be using positive 7. Positive 7 is going to help me out in finding out my base and my height. So I'm going to put 7 minus 2 here. So 7 minus 2 gives me 5, which means my base is 5. And 7 plus 5 over here for my height, which means 12 is my height. So 12 is my height, 5 is my base. And if I'm going to take in the formula, so half times base times the height, so half times the 5 times the 12. Now again, I can just simplify. 2 ones 2, and then 2 6 12, and then 6 times 5 is 30. Now I have, and it already says that it's measured in centimeters, which means that my area is supposed to be 30 centimeters square. So that is pretty much it. You have to use either the zero factor property or the quadratic formula, find your values of x, and then for solving anything further, you will always use the positive value. With that positive value, figure out your base, then your height, and then put it in the area formula, and then you will get your final answer. That is 30 centimeters square. That is pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching Easy Learn. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. If you have any questions, any confusions, you can drop them down in the comment section below. Thank you.